show. I am so excited to discuss John and Julie Gottman and Doug and Rachel Abrams' 8 dates with you today. If you are following along with us, we are on the second date, which is called Agree to Disagree, Addressing Conflict. And this is an awesome topic. I absolutely love it. He opens up the chapter talking about a couple, and he says, when you get married, it's not just two people who are joining together. It's also your different habits, personalities, belief systems, and quirks joining together. All of these things can make for quite a wild party, and if you enter into any long-term relationship thinking that the hallmark of its success is a lack of conflict, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and failure. I say this all the time. Conflict is good. We want conflict in a marriage or in a relationship. And the reason for that is because you're two different people and opposites usually attract, right? My husband and I are so different in so many different ways. We disagree on most things. And I used to really worry about that in our relationship, thinking that that wasn't a good thing. But as I have grown and as I have learned more of this marriage content, become more obsessed with having a really awesome marriage, I've realized that conflict is actually the catalyst for intimacy. If you don't have conflict, you don't have intimacy. So I welcome disagreements now. What I think about it now is that two heads are better than one, right? You want both perspectives in the mix because it gives you more to draw from, and it gives you the opportunity to know your partner on a deeper level, right? Know the stories behind their strong emotions. In fact, another quote that I really liked in here was Gottman says, "There's usually a story underneath every strong emotion. Be ready to tell each other your stories and seek the understanding that will help you manage your conflicts skillfully and with compassion." So whenever you and your partner are seeing something differently, you're disagreeing, you're having a difference of opinion, you want to really get to the root of that. You want to ask questions. You want to be curious. You want to find out, how did your partner get to where they are, thinking the way they're thinking about this certain topic, right? What are their triggers around it? What are their experiences around it? How do they think about it differently, and the same for that matter as you? So that's the really cool thing about conflict. And this was he sets you up for this date in a really great way, giving topics, a ton of topics. In fact, I think there's like 50 topics, 25 different topics of which you could disagree and you could have strong opinions about. And so he has you discuss these differences and bring that on your date. You don't have to discuss all 25, but you pick a few that appeal to you, that your partner and you are on different sides of the discussion, and you think about those differences, and then you really want to talk about them on your date. And he talks a lot about repair, and he gives different steps on how to repair after difficult conversations, especially if you fell on different sides of the aisle on it. So he says processing a fight means talking about what happened during the fight without jumping back into the ring with your boxing gloves on. It's the fight recap where you figure out how to make this particular matchup go better in the future. And that's what it's all about, right? So he gives different steps. Step 2 is my favorite, where he talks about validate each other's realities. Validating doesn't mean agreeing. It means being able to complete a sentence like, from your point of view, it makes sense that you would have these feelings and needs. I get it. Can you imagine if you had a partner that validated you, or that you could validate in a way that's saying, I don't necessarily agree with where you're at on this. However, I can totally see how you would feel that way. I get it. Isn't that the point of marriage, is to really understand where your partner falls on these things, right? And then step 3 would be triggers. We call these triggers, they're old, enduring vulnerabilities that occurred before this relationship began and have left emotional scars that can get activated, right? So be aware of your partner's triggers and see if you can learn something about them on this date. And then step 4, my other favorite, is to accept responsibility and own up to your part in the fight. Perhaps you have been overly stressed or preoccupied, or you haven't made time for your partner, or you haven't been a good listener. What can you own up to into how you contributed to the argument? It's important to avoid blame here. We discovered in our research that taking responsibility, even for a small part of the problem in communication, presents the opportunity for great repair. It's highly effective. So in every disagreement, in every difference of opinion, in every conflict, if you can pinpoint even a small part of the conflict that was yours, that you can take responsibility for, you're going to have a much higher chance of being happy in your marriage, being able to repair after these difficult conversations. So when you go on the date, he gives you conversation topics, all kinds of troubleshooting, ways to talk about conflict that are very, very healthy. And then you end the date with this affirming your future together. So I'm just going to read this. I'm going to tell you that I got like kind of emotional when my husband and I read this out loud. He doesn't get emotional, I get emotional, but it says, I commit to accepting you completely and embracing our differences. When we have conflict, I'll seek to understand your feelings and point of view about the issue, and will manage our conflict as skillfully as possible. When regrettable instances happen, which is when you might get in a fight or say things that you don't mean, I'll seek to repair the damage through the process we have discussed in this chapter. So much goodness in this second date. I hope that you will read this chapter. I hope that you will study it. I hope that you will go on this date. And next week's date is going to be so much fun. It's called Let's Get It On, Sex and Intimacy, like my favorite topic ever. Thank you guys so much for coming. Happy marriaging. To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next.